So those are the two nutrition tips. Let's move on to physical activity. So I want to make sure you're getting in your movement minutes in order to thrive through the menopause transition and beyond. Now, you probably already know your brain or your body loves physical activity, right? You know, it decreases your risk of cardiovascular disease and several types of cancers and type 2 diabetes and all of those different things, right? Movement, physical activity is good. But I want to focus on the importance of physical activity for brain health. Physical activity, getting adequate movement helps to increase our motivation. It helps us with focus. It helps us to learn new things. Physical activity is very important also for our mood. So when we go through the menopause transition, we're more likely to have that mood instability. Doesn't mean that we necessarily will have that, but we're just more, it's easier to be thrown off balance. And when we are getting physical activity, we're releasing endorphins. It elevates serotonin. So it leads to a boost in mood. In fact, Dr. Eddie Phillips, who I worked with years ago, I think over a decade ago, he told me not exercising is a depressant. He's with the Harvard Institute of Lifestyle Medicine, where I used to be guest faculty. So not exercising, not getting adequate activity is a depressant. We need to be physically active. Also, when we move, we get a release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF. Now, I love that John Rady calls this miracle grow for the brain, or he's referred to it at one of the presentations I went to of his, because it helps to grow new brain cells. So we used to think, years ago, we used to think that once you had all the brain cells in adulthood that you had, then it was just decreased from there and you tried to just hopefully not lose too many. But now with physical activity, we actually have neurogenesis, the genesis of new brain cells. We have neuroplasticity, change in those connections. We have a development of new connections. So getting physical activity is so, so important for brain health, for mental health, for increasing our cognitive reserve, for decreasing our risk of getting dementia. We also know that physical activity helps energy. So as women go through that menopause transition, as I mentioned before, we typically have a decrease in the number of mitochondria as well as a decrease in function of mitochondria. And the mitochondria are like the powerhouse of the cells, like the batteries of the cells, if you remember back to like biology in high school. And we want to increase those, right? We want to do everything we can to help our mitochondria. And how do we do that? Because so often we're like, oh, well, there's decreased energy, but it's often happens, but it's not inevitable. Oh my goodness, there is such hope. There is such excitement. There is such possibility with lifestyle medicine. So when you're more physically active, you help to develop you help to make more mitochondria, and you help your mitochondria that you have function better. So physical activity is important across the whole lifespan, but when the menopausal transition and beyond, physical activity becomes more important now than ever. We also know that people who exercise regularly, not just like once every week or two, but people who exercise regularly, that it helps, that they typically have less menopause symptoms. Now, this is me behind our house. And so I think a lot of people think I'm either somebody who loves exercise or I'm not. Now, I am not a marathon runner. I work with Dr. Amy Commander, is director of lifestyle medicine for oncology out at one of the Harvard Health System hospitals. And Dr. Beth Brady's, once again, she's at the Harvard Health System Hospitals. They're the two co-authors of the Paving the Path to Wellness books that I've done with that nonprofit. Now they run, Dr. Commander just finished the Boston Marathon a few days ago. She's amazing. They do more of that. I'm not a marathon runner. I'm not somebody who just like naturally wants to go play competitive sports. And you can get in adequate physical activity. If you're somebody who's like, I don't normally gravitate to that, you can get in 150 minutes is the recommendation, that we have at least 150 minutes of at least moderate intensity exercise a week. And you can get that in through walking. So here I am behind my house. Obviously it's a snowy day in Colorado. That's my dog Cosmo, who's no longer a puppy. He's about 5 years old. And so we will walk, and we walk fast. Now on nicer days, I'll do some Nordic walking, which is great with these they kind of look like ski poles, but you can really get some upper body movement. You can increase your heart rate, but it's important to find what you like, what's good for you with physical activity, but to be finding something that you love and doing, hopefully at least 150 minutes at a week or more. Now, every minute counts. We used to think that exercise had to be done in bouts of like 20 minutes or 10 minutes, but now what we found is really every minute counts. So you can space it out throughout the day, find ways to increase movement throughout your life. In fact, we know that people in the blue zones typically move naturally. They're not going to the gym, but they find a lot of ways to move throughout the day. They're often gardening, walking up and down hills, sitting on the floor and getting up. But every minute of movement counts. Now, what obstacles are you facing? This is a picture of me, or a picture of my wrist. And I was getting that reminder to get up and stand up and move a little for 1 minute while I was creating slides. Now, I love teaching. I love presenting. I love creating slides and figuring out ways that I can share the passion, the power of lifestyle medicine with others. But sometimes I get so excited that I sit too long in this chair. And so my obstacle that I'm facing is that I get really excited about wanting to present and share information. And sometimes I want to just get focused on creating cool slides and looking at the research, that I won't get up to move as much. And so thinking of what your obstacles are and then thinking, how can I address these obstacles? So actually my feet are on it right now. I have this ball chair. It's a picture of the one. Anyway, I don't have any association with the company. Anyway, but this is my ball chair. And I sit on this throughout a lot of the day, but it helps me to bounce more. I'm actually not sitting on it right now because I've been told sometimes I just start bouncing without thinking about it. And then after 2 hours of presenting, you're like, would she just be still? But it can help me get in some more movement into my day. Also, I'm a huge fan of the literature on exercise snacks. Now, we do recommend talking with your doctor, with your primary care provider, and get clearance for physical activity before beginning a new program or increasing your level of activity. We want you to all to be safe. But there's some research around exercise snacks and more vigorous activity being done periodically throughout the day. If you've been cleared to do this, it can help offset prolonged sitting. And so I actually have a bracelet that I'm not wearing today, but I have a bracelet that helps me track behaviors. And so what I do is I will try to run up and down my stairs or dance to some music. And I try to take a break at least every hour. Every half hour is ideal. But even if it's just for 2 or 3 minutes to get up and to do some movement, even if it's just a minute, there's some research on exercise snacks that are only a minute, but it helps to offset the detriments of prolonged sitting. Because even if you do your cardio, I do it every morning, I try to get in my cardio, but even if you do your cardiovascular movement, sitting throughout the whole day and not getting in movement minutes is really bad for your physical and mental health too. In fact, some people are saying sitting is the new smoking. So what can you do? You can stretch. I'd encourage you to stretch now. I don't usually do presentations that are this long, but oh my goodness, I hope if you're sitting or if you're listening to me, that you're not sitting for a whole 2 hours, but I encourage you just to stretch now. It feels so good, even just for me while I'm sitting here talking, to move my hands, do some different wrist circles, stretch. I'd encourage you to stand up maybe and stretch side to side, but to get some movement in. If you can step away from your computer, if you can still hear me, maybe you want to do some stretches or think about incorporating this. Maybe you want to have a dance party. It's, you have 2 minutes between your meetings. Get up and put some fun music on. Maybe it's while you're watching TV. Maybe you can get some more movement in, right, during commercials. Or maybe it's that you do some stretches. Sit down on the floor and do some stretching while you're watching TV, while doing chores. I don't know. I've never been this happy while doing while mopping. But anyway, how can you get some more movement in your day? Can you park and walk further? What can you do in order to increase your movement? Maybe it's taking a call outside, right? Rather than sitting down on the couch and talking to somebody, can you just get up and walk around your house or get outside if it's a nice day? But how can you move more? Can you schedule it? Can you put it on your calendar? Can you make it a priority? I am so busy too. I have a son with some special needs. I have 2 younger boys. I work full time. I get it. Life is busy, but physical activity has to be a priority. It has to be a priority if you want to thrive through the menopause transition and beyond. You need to move. So schedule it, make it a priority. Research shows that if you have an accountability partner, you're more likely to stick to it. And then track your progress, whether that's a little bracelet or whether it's writing down how many movement minutes did I, or how many movement exercise snacks did I take today, but track your progress. Now let's talk about striving for strength. This is tip 4, striving for strength. Now, when I really started to dig into the menopause literature, when I realized that I was going to go through premature menopause, I really started to look at, and when I felt so weak after I went through chemotherapy, I became weaker. Even though I did some physical activity and I did what I could during chemo. I mean, I had really intense chemo, and my physical activity that I was doing was was kind of all I could do with physical therapy supervision. And so I lost some lean muscle mass. And when I looked at the literature about how hard it can be to gain lean muscle mass as a postmenopausal woman, the literature is hard to look at. And so what happened is it made me even more adamant about doing everything I could to maintain the lean muscle mass that I have. And like, I'm not trying to be a bodybuilder, right? Like, that's not my goal. My goal is to have muscular strength so that I can lift things that I want to lift, so that I can play, so that I don't get fatigued. And so I think we need to strive for strength. With menopause, what we often see is an increase in body fat. So as estrogen goes down, we typically see an increased likelihood to have more body fat, increased muscle atrophy, decreased muscle strength, decreased bone strength, and decreased aerobic capacity. So that's often if women keep doing the same thing. They're not doing any resistance training. They just keep eating usually the same things. They, they're maybe just moving a little bit, or maybe they're doing some aerobic activity, but not resistance training. That's kind of like typically what happens. However, remember, it is not inevitable. Physical activity, getting adequate physical activity helps to counteract this, helps to ameliorate these changes. So physical activity has been shown to decrease body fat, to increase muscle mass. It is never too late to increase muscle strength. It is never too late to increase bone strength, to increase aerobic capacity. Physical activity, also, if we look at age-matched women and men, we find that women are more likely to not be living independently, to have an increased risk of falls and fractures, and to be hospitalized. And so being physically active increases your chances of living independently. It improves physical function, which leads to quality of life, more energy, more strength, and a positive mood. Also, we know that as we go through the menopause transition, it becomes harder to synthesize more muscle, which is why we need to get adequate but not excessive dietary protein. The recommendation is 0.8 grams per kilogram per day. A lot of experts, I once again recommend Brenda Davis's plant-powered protein book. If you're trying to increase your lean muscle mass, if you're older, maybe it's closer to like a 1 gram per kilogram per day, maybe more for other populations. So it's not like crazy excessive, but we need to be getting adequate dietary protein. We need to be getting an aerobic activity and also some resistance training where our muscles are working against a force, and decreasing our inactivity. This is all important for increased muscle synthesis. So the optimal exercise for postmenopausal body composition, when we look at systematic review and meta-analysis, so looking at a lot of different studies, when we put all of that together, we find that a combination is best. Resistance has been shown to increase muscle strength and mass. Once again, not being a bodybuilder, but being able to maintain or maybe even gain a little lean mass so that we can do what we want to do. And aerobic activity has been found to be best at decreasing fat, especially that visceral fat, which is that inflammatory and that most dangerous fat. So resistance training myths. If you do some resistance training, you will not become a bodybuilder. Like, you really need to train and focus on that if you really wanted to become a bodybuilder, right? But doing some resistance training is just important for our health and our well-being. Now, in the blue zones where they live the longest, healthiest lives, they're doing gardening, they're doing physical activity chores, but our modern society is it's so easy to be sedentary for many of us for so much of our day, that we need to find ways to get it in. I actually have some of those resistance bands. I actually have them hanging up on my wall in my den right there, so that I can't look forward aside from my computer and not see them. So my resistance bands are right there. I have a thing on the back of my door, like a strap, where I have some resistance bands always hanging there, so I can do some resistance training. If I'm watching TV, I can be doing it. But there's different ways to get in resistance training. It's not just for bodybuilders. It's not just how your body looks. I think so often people think too, like, oh, people who do resistance training, they're just into how their body looks. Well, that's fine to care about how our body looks, but we're doing it for how we feel, for how we function, for maintaining our independence. There's a lot of different options. It's not just going to the gym. I try to get to the gym where I do some resistance training with a trainer. I do it once a week for 30 minutes because it just really helps me stay on track and to know I'm doing the right form. But you can also do it at home. You can use your body weight, like if you're on your knees or even on against a wall, by doing some like body push-ups, using those elastic bands, using water resistance. You can do water aerobics and get some water resistance. I have some different things I can put on my hand that are kind of like a flipper or a fin, but you can get more resistance in the water if you're using that. You can use free weights, you can use weight machines. There's a variety of different ways to get in some good resistance training. some good resistance training. If you look at just the information on resistance training, separate from aerobic activity, people who do resistance training typically have improved mood, energy, quality of life, as well as decreasing the risk of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, cancer, musculoskeletal problems, and premature death. So there is reason to get in resistance training. Now, if we look at menopause, perimenopause, and postmenopausal women, most women aren't getting in their aerobic activity, and it is rare that we see somebody who's getting an adequate resistance training. And so I'm going to acknowledge adherence is challenging. The research shows us that adherence is challenging, but you can do it. Now you have the education, you know why it's so important. Adherence is challenging. So here are some things according to the literature that make it more likely that you will be successful with your resistance training. Focus on the health benefits. So it's not just about how you look, right? It's about thinking about how is this going to impact my brain health? How is this going to impact my ability to do what I want to do when I'm 90 years old, right? I want to be playing with my grandkids. I want to be traveling. What are the health benefits? And then how, as Peter Attia says in his book Outlive, training for the centenarian decathlon, right? Like, what do I need to be doing now so that that typical age-related decline isn't going to happen? What can I do to ameliorate that so that I never lose my functional independence, hopefully? Work with a qualified trainer or physical therapist. For me, that's been huge. If you can get a referral to a PT, they can help you put together a program to really optimize your workout or optimize what you're going to do it safely. I've worked with physical therapists in the past. I also work with a trainer, as I mentioned, once a week. But there are a lot of good resources out there. Individualize it. Do what's best for you. For me, it's like a 20 minutes or so in the gym once a week. It's 30 minutes with a trainer once a week, and then it's some different resistance bands. A few minutes here and there. You don't need tons, but doing some resistance training. Do what you enjoy. Find what it is that you enjoy, and will do it. Anticipate your positive feelings. They found that those people who anticipated how they were going to feel after doing that resistance training, after doing that physical activity, were more likely to continue to do it. So when you're thinking about getting up for the day, think about, how am I going to feel? How is this going to positively impact my mood, my brain health after, with finishing or with doing this? So anticipate those positive feelings. Find a supportive environment. So for me, that's working with a trainer once a week, but find a supportive environment. Is it finding a friend? Is it someone, an accountability buddy? How can you try to get that support that you need in order to do that resistance training? And then here's me at the gym, and I was actually wearing like a dressier shirt. And I took this picture because the gym was going to close. It was the weekend. It probably closed at like 6:30 or something. The gym was going to close, and I knew I didn't have time to run home and get changed into what I wanted to come do this. And I was like, you know what? I don't really care. I don't care if I look out of place. I don't care if this isn't what I would typically wear to the gym and I don't have the right shoes. I am going to go and I'm going to do what resistance training I can safely because I belong at a gym. I think that's often we have these stereotypes, or we have the stereotypes of like it's bodybuilders or it's men who belong in the gym. It is not. You belong anywhere where you want to be to increase your health. So plan for obstacles, plan for challenges, whether that's gyms closing or whether that's stereotypes. What is it that you need to bust and to change those myths? We are not aging like society might say a typical woman is meant to age, right? Like, we are meant to age and thrive. We are meant to live with hope and to be physically active. You deserve to be here. You deserve to be your best self, and that includes movement. Now let's talk about sleep and preparing for pillow time. I'm going to take a quick drink.